Today we're going to take a deep dive into the Arturia AudioFuse 16Rig. What are the features and do I recommend it? Stick around to find out. Hey, Dilby here. Welcome back to the channel. Whether you're a seasoned pro or just getting started on your production journey, an audio interface is a fundamental piece of kit for any studio. So today I'm going to be showing you through Arturia's flagship interface, the AudioFuse 16Rig. I'll give you an overview of the features, some of the pros and cons of the unit, and why it made the cut to become my new audio interface in the studio. For a little context, I was previously using the Audient ID22 interface. Unfortunately, the converters died and the interface stopped working a couple of months after being out of warranty. A quick search on Reddit and Gearspace showed this seems to be a pretty common problem for the ID22. Audient were pretty dismissive of this, and the cost of repairing the unit would have been almost the same as replacing it, so I took this as a sign that I should look at upgrading. I tried and tested a bunch of different interfaces and settled on the Arturia AudioFuse 16Rig. Arturia were actually kind enough, like some other companies, to send out a test unit. When I told them I was going to go with the 16Rig, they told me I could keep the unit if I wanted in exchange for a review, which I plan to do anyway. But of course, they have no say of this review and they've not seen the video before I'm publishing it. But I just felt it was important to mention that for full transparency. In terms of build quality, the AudioFuse 16Rig features a full metal chassis and comes in a 19-inch rack mount form factor. The included rack mount ears also double as feet, if you prefer to use it in a desktop format. The back panel features 16 analog inputs and 10 analog outputs, as well as a dual ADAT ports, which offers an additional 16 digital inputs by pairing it with an ADAT preamp. We see MIDI in, out, and through, as well as clock output, and word clock in and out for synchronizing your whole studio setup. The AudioFuse 16Rig also features a USB hub with an additional USB 2.0 inputs on the front and rear of the unit. Finally, on the back, we have the power input and a USB-C port, which connects it to the computer. On the front panel, we see our two standard mic line inputs and a 3.5mm jack input for plugging in a device like a phone, for example. These mic line inputs are not additional to the rear inputs. When you connect something to the front panel, the unit actually overrides the corresponding rear inputs. Pretty smart. Additionally, we see dual outputs on the front panel, and this could be really handy for routing audio, for example reamping or effects units like guitar pedals. In the center, we have the control section featuring a color display, rotary encoders, and buttons to access the inputs, outputs, settings, and mixer section. These controls are actually pretty vital, as a notable feature of the 16Rig is that it can be used with or without the computer. For example, as a main hub for like a live setup. We then come to the volume control section with a large encoder for the main monitors and a smaller knob for the dual headphone outputs. We also have a dedicated mute button and an assignable function button, which can be set to mono or dim. Next, we have another USB input and a MIDI hub input for connecting compatible devices. Finally, we have an illuminated power button to turn the AudioFuse on and off. A very cool additional feature here, when the unit is powered on, you can press this button to bring up the AudioFuse Control Center Software on the computer. This is super handy and really creates a streamlined feel between the hardware and software. Speaking of the software, let's take a quick look at the AudioFuse Control Center. I have to say, this software is incredibly intuitive when compared to some other companies. Audient. The AFCC gives you complete control over your routing and monitoring. You can use it to adjust your inputs and outputs, set up custom mixes, and I really like the way that you can assign names and create stereo pairs of your inputs and outputs. This really helps keep things organized and means I can remember what's plugged in and where. You can even assign MIDI CCs to the mixer to give yourself tactile control over the mixer section via a MIDI controller. This could be super handy when using the AudioFuse in standalone or in a live setting, for example. In the routing matrix, you have complete control over the signal path of all of the analog and digital inputs and outputs. I'm not going to lie, this is a bit above my pay grade, but I do see that it makes the 16Rig very customizable to specific needs and scenarios. Another useful touch is that the AudioFuse will remember the latest settings for standalone use until the next time you connect it and change them. And as with most Arturia hardware, it comes bundled with a bunch of plugins, including Analog Lab Intro and a whole load of effects. Now let's talk about the pros and cons of the AudioFuse 16Rig. Pros. It has an insane number of physical inputs and outputs, making it a great option for hybrid hardware and software studios. The unit has a very intuitive and functional layout and software integration. The 16Rig features super crisp sound with ultra low noise ADAC converters, 24-bit depth and up to 192 kHz sample rate. It's built like a tank with a robust metal chassis that feels incredibly durable. At the same time, the design is sleek and modern, fitting seamless into any studio. Cons. The price. The unit is €12.99 or $14.99, making it an expensive piece of kit. That said, I do think it offers great value. It's a pro-level audio interface and it's actually cheaper than most of the comparable units from other manufacturers. But the price does mean that it's not going to be for everyone. The onboard screen is small and cluttered, which makes it difficult to see the volume level at a glance. I would love to see a firmware update that shows a large volume value on the main screen. There's no phantom power, line, pad, etc. controls on the front panel. These have to be operated via the software, either on the unit or via the AudioFuse Control Center, which slows down the workflow a little when recording. Why it suits my needs. I use a hybrid setup, combining hardware and software, running Ableton Live as my DAW. The main functions of my studio are split between writing and production and mixing and mastering for clients. I incorporate a selection of outboard synths and hardware processing units in my workflow, and I like to work with vocalists and instrumentalists as often as I possibly can. So the connectivity on the AudioFuse 16Rig is perfect and offers loads of opportunity for expansion. My studio is pretty small and it's important to me to have the things that I need at arm's reach when I'm working. Otherwise, they just don't end up getting used. Because of these limitations, I utilize a desktop rack mount system, practical use of space, and the AudioFuse 16Rig slots in perfectly. The huge number of inputs and outputs means I can actually ditch the patched bay I was using, which simultaneously makes space for another synth or hardware unit. It streamlines my workflow. In conclusion, if you're in the market for a new audio interface and your budget allows for it, I highly recommend checking out the AudioFuse 16Rig. With its comprehensive connectivity, top-tier preamps and user-friendly software, it's a true powerhouse in any studio setting. If you're working purely in the box or just getting started and want something a bit easier on the bank balance, you can check out the MiniFuse line from Arturia, which are great options and very affordable value. Personally, I use the MiniFuse 1 in my basic home setup. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed the review, make sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon. Alright guys, that's the Arturia AudioFuse 16Rig. Hopefully that gave you some insight into the unit, and if you have any questions about the 16Rig or any other gear I use, then drop them in the comments below. Well, that's it from me today. We'll catch you next time. Peace!